Well, a couple of years ago, Amy and I made our way up to Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, all the way up north, and we had a goal. We were going there to experience Moose Alley. That's one of Amy's favorite animals, and we got up there to look for a moose, and unfortunately, it didn't produce. But we learned something really amazing about Pittsburgh, something that just kind of stuck with me after our visit there. It's a really unique place. It's actually, even though it doesn't have a huge population, it's the largest town, location-wise, space-wise, in all of New England. Not only that, but it borders Vermont, it borders Maine, and it borders Canada. So it has some really unique geographical features in that way, too. It's right up there past the White Mountains and rugged territory. It's really beautiful up there. It's a different part of New Hampshire in many ways. But what's also interesting about Pittsburgh, something that I didn't know, and it's this. In the 1830s, Pittsburgh, well, for a short few years, it didn't really have a home. It wasn't part of Vermont. It wasn't part of Maine. It wasn't part of New Hampshire. It wasn't part of Canada, and it wasn't even part of the United States. Pittsburgh declared independence, and there was a legitimate reason why. There was a border dispute between the United States and Canada at the time, and the good people of Pittsburgh decided to declare independence until these two countries, whom they were being both taxed by, could figure this mess out. So they declared themselves their own country. They had their own constitution. They had their own leaders, they had their own militia, and they even had their own stamps. This is a bold move, but they were desperate. So they stepped into no man's land. They became a community without a country. They became a place without a clear identity. And thinking about this, well, it hit me. It hit me that being without an identity is not just a geography problem. It's also a people problem, too. When we don't know where we belong, it's easy to lose sight of who we are. But what if there was a way for us to know who we are? To know your core identity that no border, no success, or no loss could take away. Well, in our last series, we explored a question, and the question was, what's your name? We saw that how often God, in the middle of our stories, can give us a name in a way that changes everything for us. And today's question, who am I? It sounds really similar to that, but it's actually quite different. Back then, we saw how God names in the middle of the story, but today, as we begin a new series together, we're going to be asking who we are before the story even starts. But like many other questions, with this question, there is a question behind the question, and that question is this: do I matter? Do I matter? It's a question that surfaces at 100 different moments throughout all of our lives. When you're passed over for a promotion, or when you walk into school wondering if anyone will see you, when the last child finally leaves the home and you look at yourself, you look at your life, and you start to wonder, well, what's next? What's next for me? In those moments, we don't just ask ourselves, where do I fit? We ask ourselves, who am I now? Who am I now? And it happens to everybody. As I've walked through life with so many faithful servants here at Christ Church, one of the struggles that people often face here is just the simple but difficult struggle of aging. And when we start to age, we start to lose our ability to do the things that we used to do. We lose the ability to do the things that we used to do in the way, in the speed, and the efficiency that we used to. But also there's a real and present challenge of memory too. When we lose our memory, we lose so much more. It feels in some ways like in those moments we are losing everything. It's not just that. In the age of AI that is sneaking up against us, look, there have been times in history where technology has progressed and people have lost good work that they were very skilled at because technology just went beyond what they were capable of doing. But this new age that we're facing, it's raising new questions and coming at high speeds. And when we're faced with these unsettling questions, when our work is who we have to ask ourselves, who are we when our work goes away? That's a tough one. And that's why this question is so important. In fact, important kind of feels like an understatement today. This question, it touches on everything in our lives. It touches on how we carry ourselves, how we show up for other people, or how we face opportunity and how we face loss in our lives. When you don't feel like you matter, you start to pull back. You stop giving yourselves. And when you stop giving yourselves, you stop living. You stop living. And that's what's at stake. And why we need to ask, what if there was a flip in our mind, a fundamental change in the way that we think about life that could help us weather those storms when they come, but not just help us weather the storms, help us to level up the way that we live in life, even when we're experiencing success and the good things. So here's the question that I want to ask that can shape every area of your life. What gives you a place in the world that can't be taken away? What gives you a place in the world that can't be taken away? Well, to answer that question, we need to go way back to the beginning, before there were jobs, titles, wins, losses, before any of that, the moment when identity was defined. The very first page of the Bible, in the very first page we read, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Scholars often see this as a headline for the next few moments and actions that are about to take place. And right away, right out of the gate, we get this picture in verse 2 of disorder. Look at this with me. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Formless, empty, dark. Not the way that it's supposed to be. And this is the canvas that God is using to start to paint a picture of order, of something beautiful, of something good, of something with purpose. Well, you've probably encountered this story before if you haven't read it many times in your life, but God starts with these words, "Let there be light." And he starts this process, this 7-day process where on each day, each of the first 3 days, he separates something. He separates the light from the darkness. That's the first day. On the second day, he separates the waters above from the waters below to create the heavens, the skies. And on the third day, he separates the waters below so that land and vegetation can appear. As scholars call these first days the days of forming. What's happening is God is creating space for things to occupy, and it's going to make sense when we look at the next 3 days. The next 3 days are called the days of filling. The days of filling. And on the fourth day, the moon and the sun, they're put in the skies to govern the light, to give order to the universe. On the fifth day, birds and fish are sent to occupy the skies. You can see how it matches the skies and the waters. And then on the sixth day, animals are sent throughout the land to populate the land. And, you know what all of this is called? And I just want to just draw your attention. You see the symmetry here? It's very orderly. It has a lot of purpose. It just kind of makes sense together. God calls it good. It's good. Now, there is a lot that could be said about this passage, and well-meaning people understand the mechanics differently, the details, and how it all kind of works out in the world. But however you see the mechanics of this passage and how it works out in the world, the big picture is still the same. God takes formless and empty things and he makes them full, and he makes them good. This isn't just a part of the story of Genesis 1. This is the story of the entire book of Genesis. He takes messy people in messy situations, and he brings order and purpose and good into their lives throughout this entire book. And at the very end, he closes with this beautiful story of the patriarch Joseph, who was betrayed by his brothers. He was thrown into slavery. He was thrown into prison. And then finally, at the end, further into his life, when he encounters his brothers again, after all this abuse and all this wrongdoing, one of the first things that he says to them is, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Amen. That's who God is. He takes broken, inert, disorderly things, and he brings order, life, and goodness. That's what we see in the earliest pages. It's formless, it's darkness, it's void, and it's also reshaped, it's filled, and it's given a name, and that name is good. But there is a twist coming, and it's this: good, as good as it is, surprisingly, it isn't enough. It's not enough. One of the privileges of living in New Hampshire is just the rich beauty that is all around us. One of my favorite things to do on my day off is to take the kids on a hike in the wilderness on one of the trails. And I at least always try to do something different, go to a different place. And what's surprising about it is, trees are trees everywhere, right? But every place we've gone, it's like, wow, this place feels different. We went to the falls over by Market Basket, Tucker Hills Falls. A couple weeks ago, last week, we went to the historic Monson Trail off of Federal Hill Road. There's just so much beauty around us, and I know that many of you know what I'm talking about, because as we have spoken, you've talked about how often you experience God, or you feel close to God when you are out in nature. And that makes sense when you're looking at the limitless green and the beauty that there is. Or you look up at the open sky and you see how big it is. It helps us to envision and experience a God who created them, who is vastly bigger than some of the confined spaces that we often find ourselves in. Now imagine being there in that vivid imagery of Genesis 1, seeing waters separated, seeing vegetation pop out of nowhere. Also, just for a minute, picture the place that you experience, the spot that you think of the most, when you think of the most breathtaking place that you've ever been. You have that in your mind? Think about it. And now, imagine a voice, a kind, a gentle voice, coming out of nowhere and saying this: "This is good. but it's missing the finishing touch. What could take something that is already breathtaking and push it off the charts? Here's the surprise. God doesn't stop at good. He creates the crown jewel of creation, and only then does he call creation very good. Let's read this together. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish and in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all over the wild animals and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Now, you may have noticed that phrase, "let us make mankind in our own image." And people have wondered throughout the centuries, is this a reference to the Trinity? God in three persons, the Holy Spirit, the Son, the Father. And then some people have also wondered, is this the heavenly court, this assembled group of spiritual entities like angels that are often depicted throughout the Old Testament? And people are curious and they wonder, and they've wrestled with this for centuries. Either way, the thrust is not so much who is in the conversation, but what God says next. Humans, mankind is created in God's image. Now, Christians have understood this expression in various ways throughout the centuries also. Is it our ability to think and create that sets us apart from the animals, or our calling to represent God, or a capacity to have a relationship? There's truth in all of those things. But for today, I want to just step into an ancient person's shoes to try to listen and understand how they would have first heard this expression. And I want to talk about why it matters too. Some of the best scholarship today has noticed that there's something fascinating about that word image. It's very close to the word icon, or even the word idol. An ancient person would have known what that meant because they were surrounded by different cultures and different people who worshiped different gods, and they worshiped them through idols, through statues. And those statues were meant to represent the reign of their God in that place. Now the Israelites, they didn't use idols. And they didn't use idols, they rejected idols even, because you can't make an image of God because there's nothing that could represent him adequately. And here's the surprising thing. God already made one. And that idol, that icon, is us. It's us. We are his image. Living statues, showing that wherever you are and whoever you're with, he reigns in the world. We are the cherry on top of creation. How wild is that? But there's more. Sometimes when we talk about the image of God, we hear this phrase, or we use this phrase, we bear the image of God. But some recent work on some of the prepositions in the original language, prepositions are those little words like in, on, over, under. And I know you were all excited about hearing a lesson on prepositions today, but this is important. Some recent work on those prepositions, especially that one in, created in the image of God, has found that that word in the original Hebrew is very similar to the word as. They're often almost used interchangeably. And that means that you are created as the image of God. The image of God is not, for clarification, it's not how you were created. It's not just something that you carry. It's not something that you can lose. We are the image, the icon of God. Living statues in creation, announcing wherever we go that he is king. Well, perhaps some of you are thinking, though, that's nice, but how can I matter if I don't really do anything anymore? How can I matter? For some, this isn't just a curiosity. For some of you, for some of us, it feels like a sin to exist and to not do anything and to say that we matter. Now, I'm not here to say that productivity is bad. The Bible says a lot of good things about bearing fruit. But think about a statue with me for a minute. Statues don't do anything. Their value is in what they represent. Just this week, down at Gillette Stadium, there was a very important statue that was revealed, a statue of Tom Brady. And he was there to celebrate and commemorate the moment. And Tom, can I call him Tom? I don't know Tom. Tom said this, this is a great memorial for New England fans. It's also the perfect target for Jet fans to throw beer cans at. That was pretty good. A statue doesn't throw a football. A statue does not win championships. But it reminds us that someone important, someone great, was there. And if that's true for a hunk of metal, how much more true is it of living, breathing beings that represent someone who was once there, but not just someone who was once there, someone who is still there too. Well, if statues can make people pause, what about a rare encounter in the wild? I was driving home from church. This was a few months ago. I was driving on my way to Merrimack, and then out of the blue, this big black figure bolted across the road in front of me. And, I stopped right in the middle of the road. And the person behind me stopped in good timing, too. They weren't eager for me to move because they knew what was happening. Something special had just occurred. And off to my left, I took a picture of the two figures that remained, two smaller figures, two little cubs that I found watching their mom cross the road. I call this photo Bearamack. Now we all know the rules, right? You see two cubs and Mama Bear is probably close, so stay in your car. It's dangerous. Oh, it's also mesmerizing, mysterious. I know, we've talked before. You've lived in New Hampshire, some a few years, some many years. Not everybody, even lifers, have seen a bear in the wild. This is a special thing. It's mystifying because they're like kings of the forest out here. Their rarity makes these moments priceless. They seal themselves on our memories. There's really nothing quite like it. We don't usually feel this way about people. Now, look, I know that many of you are looking for places where there are no people. And as a fellow introvert, hey, it's okay to want some space. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something lost in our encounters with people. They are not just the good of creation. Mankind is the jewel, the crown of creation. As unique and diverse as each person is, each person still signals to the world that God is here. And here's where the rubber meets the road. That means you. That means you. Without doing anything, before you did anything spectacular or before you even failed in your life, you are a living and breathing reminder that God is here. That's not just good. That is very good. In the moments where we feel like, our value is questionable, your status really remains unquestionable. In your unique way, you express that God is here. As beautiful as creation was before you were here, there is still something missing. You are the finishing touch of creation, a call to look forward and a call to look upward. Apart from your goals, apart from your wins, apart from your faults, apart from your legacy, you matter. You matter because you are God's marker, his rare, intentional, impossible to ignore claim on this world. You matter. And there are some times when we get a glimpse of that in a really unexpected way. I think this just happened yesterday. There was an NFL preseason game between the Lions and the Falcons. Well, in the middle of the game, something went down. A player went down, a player by the name of Maurice Morris, went down and he couldn't get up. The stretcher came out into the field, and players from both teams, they gathered around, as happens on occasion. They gathered around to pray in a circle. I think we have a picture of that. They prayed, and then they went back to their lines. But what's really interesting is what happened next. They didn't start the next play. The clock kept going. The clock kept going. A minute turned into 2 minutes. 2 minutes turned into 3 minutes. 3 minutes to 4 to 5 to 6. They weren't playing. Now, there's nothing wrong with continuing to play. Injuries happen in football. Ankles break. People get carted. They get carted off the field. But this moment was really different. I think it was kind of one for the ages. In that moment, the players let the clock disappear. They let the game go away. Why? Because the player was more important than the game. The player was infinitely valuable as God's marker, and so are you. Maybe you have spent this week feeling like your value is slipping. Like, you've just been watching opportunities pass by. The things that you used to be known for now belong to somebody else. You're passing down what's important to you, but you didn't have a say in it. You had no choice in the matter. Maybe you're working harder than you've ever worked before, and you still feel invisible in life. You stayed late, you picked up extra shifts, you picked up the slack, you hit all the deadlines, but still nobody seems to notice or show appreciation for all that you do. Maybe you've been told directly or indirectly that you don't matter unless you produce, unless you perform, unless you impress. You hear in a way the conversation shifts, how the conversation shifts when you're not accomplishing things at work or in your relationships. And you hear it in a way that when those things shift regarding the things that you can't accomplish, that the silence that comes from people tells you that you're not meeting expectations. You're not enough. But what if you could see differently this week? And that's where I want to invite you to participate with me in a little bit of an exercise over the next 3 days. Simple. When you go out to the grocery store or when you go to work and you see somebody in the hallway or you see somebody in the hallway at school, wherever you're going this week, when you see a person, I want you to do something maybe a little bit differently and just pause. Just pause. Take a brief moment. Not necessarily to connect with them in a different way, although you might. Pause to reflect and think in your mind, that person is a marker of God's presence in the world. And when you've done that, breathe in and just take a note of how that changes inside of you. Take a note of what shifts inside of you, what changes, what your experience is like. Then, as you go home at the end of the day, maybe it's been a day filled with missed opportunities, filled with words that you don't really love ascribing to yourself, but words bouncing in your head about yourself. I want you to take that experience earlier in the day and look in the mirror and ask yourself this question: how does that change the way that I see me? How does that change the way that I see me? Now imagine what could happen if we actually lived like this. Imagine a church where we looked at each other and saw God's fingerprints instead of human flaws, where our first response isn't to correct or to compare, but to call out God's good in somebody's life, a place where the newest face feels at home. Imagine a family where the person across the table mattered even before they proved themselves, where dinner was not a conversation about scorecards, but a place to share our failures and to share our dreams, where worth wasn't earned, but worth was assumed. Imagine a business where an employee was more than a number or a title, where people were noticed for who they are and not just for what they produce, where affirmation is as normal as a deadline. If we started to see people this way, we could see ourselves this way too. And we wouldn't just believe the truth that we are God's rare, impossible to ignore claim on the world, we would live it. So whether today you find yourself here kind of feeling like you're in no man's land, or whether you find yourself on the sideline as you watch the clock ticking out, remember that the person is more important than the game. And you are that person. You are that rare, intentional, impossible to ignore claim that God has on this world, a living reminder that He is here. And that, my friends, that is not just good, that's very good. Very good. Let's pray.